Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Dr. Shah and let's get right into it. So this is the third video in our series on the Be, Do, Have model for crushing your interviews. If you haven't really had a chance to see the previous one, that's totally fine. However, I do strongly recommend watching them in the order that they were released because I feel like you'd get the best results from doing so, all right? Okay, so we started the Do section on how to gather data to prepare for your interview. If you haven't seen that, I highly recommend going and watching that. We'll wait right here. Just go click on the link over here somewhere and make your way there and we'll be right with you as soon as you're finished, all right? Because I cannot count the number of times it's become so obvious that people have not researched the program. Do not be that person. Go watch that video and make sure you do not ask any questions that could be easily found online. And if you've already watched it, let's go. So interviews are tricky because you want to be able to showcase your personality, but you also want to be able to read the interviewer very effectively. You want to be able to articulate all your points in a very finite amount of time. You want to be prepared, but you don't want to be too prepared lest you sound like a robot. You want to be excited, enthusiastic, but you don't want to be super unhinged to the extent that the program just doesn't even rank you, okay? It can be really tough. It's kind of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, where you don't want to be too much or too little, but just right in that sweet spot where it's just right. And quite frankly, it can be really difficult to convey that without feedback, and that's why I'm offering a one-on-one session. If you guys are interested in that, feel free to reach out to me through DMs or emails, and that's the best way to really determine if what you're doing is really working for you, and I can help you with that. But if not, that's totally fine too. There's a lot of really great free information that I think that you would really benefit from as well. This is a technique that I came across when I was preparing for my own interviews, and it's called the STAR method, all right? So let's go. So there's this graphic that I found. We'll include it here somewhere. So basically, this graphic shows you the STAR method, STAR. So this is an excellent graphic, and I really think it summarizes everything that you need to know. And if you use this, you're going to be in very good position for your interviews and to be answering the questions in a very precise and effective manner. So it's very easy to start rambling on your interviews. You know, interviews are very high stress situations. I've seen it happen a lot where I've asked somebody a question and, you know, for whatever reason, whether it be nerves or they were just caught off guard by the question, they just start rambling and then ultimately forget to actually answer the question that I had posed. Or what ends up happening is when they answer the question, they just start listing attributes that they have when they're answering the question itself, which again is not very effective. So I would strongly recommend using this particular technique. Some of the best interviewees that I have personally seen, they come off as very personable, they're precise, they're authentic, it's very natural. And the precision is really important because that conveys a sort of clarity of thought and organized mind that really is a good look for when we're looking for a resident. You want to have someone that's precise, thoughtful, and personable. So you want to convey all of these things while you're having your interview. I would really urge you to go through these points, and I've included a worksheet. You can take a look at the worksheet, and I would urge you to go through these and prepare. However, you want to I would recommend using bullet points because I feel that when you use bullet points when you're going through the worksheets, it sort of allows you to be more natural and provide your own personal mannerisms, and you don't fall into the trap of sounding overly rehearsed and monotonous, which is very boring to listen to.
Oh, my life!
It's also not great. The first letter is S in the STAR method. So what does S stand for? As we can see in the graphic, S essentially stands for setting the scene. You want to spend approximately 20% of your answer on setting the scene. So I prepared for my interviews with a family friend of mine who is very good at interviewing, and she helped me quite a bit. And one of the best recommendations that she gave me was to come up with a list of scenarios and situations that occurred to me throughout medical school, throughout various aspects of my medical journey, and really write these down. Ideally, the thing is that you want to be able to use these stories and these scenarios in this S category when you are answering the question. And for context, the perfect scenario would be something that you would be able to use as an example to answer multiple questions. Now, the most commonly asked questions often are tell me about yourself. What's your greatest strength? What's your greatest weakness? Tell me about a time that you handled conflict. Those are very easy, lowball questions that softball, I don't know the term. They're very simple questions that you can easily prepare for and something to have in your arsenal. So now that you've set the scene, that's as you move on to T. And T mentions the task, the problem, or the challenge. Essentially, T is the question that you've been posed and the question that you need to answer for the interviewer. Then you move on to A. A is where you need to spend the majority of your time. I would say approximately 60% of the answering time should be spent on describing the actions that you took, which in turn led to solving the problem or completing the task. Then you move on to R. R really pertains to the results. You essentially want to spend 10% of the time on this and essentially use this as an opportunity to tie in all the things that you mentioned in STA and really just tie them up in a neat little bow and just in a one-liner explain what the results of your actions really were. So essentially there's usually multiple different interviewers when you are interviewing for a medical residency program. Typically the slot per person tends to range between 15 to 20 minutes. So you don't really want to ramble on and not give the interviewer a chance to ask you more than one question, which by the way has occurred on multiple occasions. You want to be able to use your good judgment and conversational skill set to be able to read the interviewer and be able to gauge whether they're kind of being zoned out, if they're bored, and if that's the case, this is your cue to wrap it up and move on to the next thing. So residents and attendings are very tired people, so try to keep things around 3 to 4 minutes. That's a good amount of time to be able to answer multiple questions with the given interviewer. So let's go through an example. So this is something that I use during my interviews, and I think it's a very effective example because it can be used to answer more than one type of question. So here, let's set the scene. All right, so using the STAR method, let's set the scene. So when I was a third-year medical student, I was in my surgery rotation. And so the way that the surgery rotation was set up is that we had to decide amongst ourselves. There were 3 other medical students, and we decided amongst ourselves which medical student had the opportunity to scrub into a given surgical procedure. And as you can imagine, the different types of surgeries that you got to see allowed you to glean a lot of different types of educational experiences. Well, while I was doing this rotation, there was one particular medical student who was on the team, and I don't think she really meant to. However, she did end up just scrubbing in without discussing the cases and without having us distribute the cases. She would go into the best and most interesting cases, and this got a little bit frustrating for everybody on the team because we felt that we all weren't getting the same diverse range of educational experience. So now I've set the scene. Now let's move on to T. So now let's say, for example, the question is, how did you deal with conflict? Now I would take this example and use it to illustrate a way that I use to deal with conflict, and then move on to A, which is the actions that I took. Now let's pick. We had this scenario, we had this medical student. While I don't usually typically have a lot of conflict, I've been fortunate enough to get along with most people. The most people that I worked with were great, and this person was also great too. It was just a matter of a lack of communication. So I sort of took it upon myself to take us all out for coffee. So the group of us, we all went out for coffee. It was a neutral setting, and felt that this was a great time for us to just discuss that, perhaps we need to work on a schedule or sort of a rotation so that we could all have more of an equitable and diverse range of experiences so that nobody feels like they were missing out on some sort of educational opportunity. And once I proposed this as a possible way for us to keep track of who gets to go into the surgeries and who gets to scrub in, and to do so in a fair and equitable manner, everyone seemed to be really on board. And I felt that through this, we worked on our conflict, and it was something that was solution focused. And as the result of that, we all ended up having a diverse range of exposure to the different surgical cases, and it was quite good. And we all got along afterwards. And I think that just dealing with conflict in that way way where you take someone to the side and address it in a non-confrontational, non-accusatory fashion is a great way to deal with conflict, and focusing on solutions and dealing with those in a way that moves everybody forward. So as you can see, in this way, I was able to address the question of how I dealt with conflict and do so without just listing, oh, I'm a good listener, I'm a good communicator, I focus on solutions. You know, it's all well and good to just list those out, but it's more powerful to describe a situation and really bring the listener in and allow them to truly see how you would actually implement that in real life. And this is really easy to use in a different situation as well. Now, let's say if you had to reuse this scenario for another question, for example, what is your greatest strength? You could say my greatest strength is facilitating harmony, or my greatest strength is to try to take the initiative. And as you can imagine, these responses can easily be applied to the scenario that I described earlier. So in this way, I think that using the STAR method is a fantastic way of getting your point across in a very precise and authentic fashion that really truly allows you to showcase your personality and do so in an effective manner. I really hope you found this useful. I really do see a difference I really saw a difference when I used these techniques as an interviewee. I felt that my interviewers were more engaged, and as an interviewer on the other side of the table now, I'm definitely more engaged when someone tells me a story rather than just listing off all the wonderful attributes that they allegedly have. So I hope that was helpful. I'll catch you all in the next one and see you there. Bye.